Hey there, listener. Have you experienced these wonderful periods of time where you are in the flow? Your creative juices are moving, you're inspired, you're charismatic, everything seems to be going your way. And then all of a sudden, you drop out of it. You fall out of flow and you experience frustration, irritation, numbness, annoyance, probably so much more. Today, we're going to be exploring why that might be and what value exploring both sides of that spectrum may have. I have Leo Mars, a high school dropout, writer, breath advocate, entrepreneur, someone who has explored this spectrum of human experience from nightclubs to breath studios. We are here to discuss exploring your breath as a portal to your consciousness and what it means to really be comfortable with all of your humanity. So stay tuned.
Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world, to the experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy, and here is where you free your soma. I'm your host, Aimee Takaya. I'm here to help you move from pain to power, from tension to expansion, and ultimately from fear to love.
Hi, Leo. It's so nice to finally get to meet you.
Yeah, so great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're going to have this conversation. I feel like this is very apt, this subject for me, myself. I really feel like not only for myself, but my clients, many people that I know out there are struggling with this, idea that they want to be in the flow, right? They want to be in the flow and they want to feel good and they want it all the time. And they want to figure out a way to not have that drop out or disappear or go away, right? But at the end of the day, like we don't have as much control over that as we want to have, right? So would you like to maybe orient our audience a little bit to, you know, as a breath advocate, as someone who's paying attention to that ebb and flow of literally oxygen moving in and out of our bodies, how does that relate to this subject of creativity and of flow that we're going to discuss today?
Yes, absolutely. Well, this is the juicy stuff. Thank you for that question. For me, it was really frustrating. At 27, I had kind of an awakening experience while I was running a nightclub and restaurant and kind of very mixed up in kind of a mistaken sense of identity. From that moment forward, I would slip into these, like what I would call it. And I know it's a bit overused, but these like flow states
Mm.
that would last sometimes as long as like 3 weeks at a time. And for about 10 years, I would be so frustrated by that switching, like going into this really ordinary, very human, fear-based self. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this like la la land where everything is working out and I'm not in any stress. And it feels like I'm just kind of moving with, being like water. And so for so long, that was driving me crazy. And, for me, it's quite a thing to unpack. But, after I opened the breath studio in early 2018 and really got very connected to the breath, we would do these deep transformative breathing sessions. And it's like, oh, wow, I'm like liberating, kind of like peeling the onion to a more true me, like where I'm more present, there's a sparkle in my eye, and things are just a little less tense and kind of fight or flight. And it wasn't until years later, me and a lot of the teachers, we would ask this question, like, if breath is so powerful in a contained setting, like, what should our breath be like in our everyday life? Like,
Yeah.
what are we missing out on?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And it wasn't until years later that I really got connected to Eckhart Tolle talks about it in A New Earth. He says you can't take a conscious breath and think at the same time. Conscious breathing stops your mind. And like all of the masters and gurus have talked about breath awareness, including it said the Buddha never gave meditation instructions without first breath awareness. And so I started practicing that kind of in my daily life. There's like a physiological way to breathe that's just healthy. And there's some variations on what you'll hear, but it's like slow, low, and through the nose. And there's reasons for that, nasal nitric oxide, other things. But then there's this breath awareness, not manipulating the breath, just bringing your attention to the breath. And what I realized when I really started practicing it with sincerity, I realized that it works. 100% of the time it works. The breath is only ever happening in the moment, in your soma, in your body. And when we're in the moment, we're essentially like kind of like priming ourselves for that flow. So all that we desire to be, that what I call the new creator, or the truer you, is waiting in the moment. We're already it. So that's kind of how it's all connected for me.
Yeah, I love this. And I think it's really hard for people to imagine, the idea of like, oh, just becoming aware of your breath. It seems like maybe such a chore, in the same way that sometimes meditation,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I've got to do this thing. I've got
Yeah.
to like, right. And what you're speaking to here that I love is similar to what I tell people with the somatic movements, that are micro movements that I teach, is that it's always there for you. It's actually there even when you're not there paying attention to it.
Mhm.
It's right below the surface all the time. So it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be an effort to bring your awareness there. It's simply a practice. It's something that
Mhm.
you're just not used to doing it. And that's why it
Mhm.
feels like such an
Mhm.
effort, to sit and just let yourself be still and notice your monkey mind, right? In like a seated meditation practice. In the beginning,
Mhm.
it's going to feel very effortful, right?
Mhm.
Because it's something you're not used to doing. It's like,
Mhm.
lifting weights at a new weight level that you're not used to lifting, right? But the cool thing about this, as you're describing, is it's just right there all the time. And if we're not trying to fix it or change it or make it different than it is, we're just being with that air coming in and air going out. It doesn't have to become like a strenuous, effortful practice. In fact, it can be very allowing, it can be very like yin in a way.
Absolutely. And that's really what it's all about, being with what is. There's the pain and the suffering. And when we're in the moment, when we're truly present, we're not conjuring that suffering. So we're with what is. That's a powerful place to be, and certainly has a lot less tension and stress than, life is hard, right? Like life, there's pain, there's friction. We're made of flesh. We have senses. We live in the modern world. But you're absolutely right. It's right there. And sometimes when you get present, you'll might be feeling grief or sadness or something that you're kind of trying to avoid. But in the process of staying there with it, as you know, it will digest through your consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, maybe you could say a little bit about this when we're talking about breath, because you're talking about something very simple and accessible and nurturing right now. And at the same time, I know there's people who are listening who are like, but is that even breath work? Right? Like, is that like,
Hmm.
what is that? Because we're
Hmm.
more accustomed to these very effortful practices. Right. And I know
Hmm.
that you just mentioned like going into those kind of effortful transformational where we're creating a lot of energy in our bodies. We're up regulating our nervous system to down regulate it, right? Like maybe you can give us a little bit of, again, that idea of the full spectrum. If this is this kind of gentle, simple, nurturing thing, what's the other end of that look like? And how does that balance out or relate to this more
Hmm.
soft experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, that word breath work, I've always been kind of like towards, because for me, like at least, what I've noticed is that when someone has what we might call a big experience with breath work, it's no longer work, right? It's like, I want to go back there. I want to feel that again. So I tend to not use the word breath work unless I have to. I like to call it active breathing.
Mm.
So I kind of see two sides of the street there, two different kind of use cases for breath or conscious breathing. One would be the active breathing or the breath work, and the other would be breath awareness. I see both of them as essentially kind of leading to the same outcome, and working, they can really work together. So let's say laying down or whatever format you're doing the rhythmic active breathing, this helps to not only kind of like liberate or like to kind of slough off the fear response, the stress, anxiety, hypertension. Modern life is stressful. All you got to do is hop in the car and there's stress. And so the practice of active breathing will not only help to kind of like shed that stuff and kind of like regulate the nervous system really through that rhythm, but it also can do that deeper work of stripping off layers of false identity, like digesting and working through, let's say, grief that we're not really processing, or worry or regret or, sadness. So that in a sense will make being in the moment easier
Yeah.
because you're not, carrying that weight. But then the breath awareness, it's like the path. It's like the button you can press to get there, and it gets easier to flex that muscle the more, in my experience, the more active breathing or breath work that you practice.
Mm.
Both of them, like breath awareness to me is a muscle. And it's like being present, like for so long, I would be like, I read The Power of Now at like 22, like 20 years ago, right? And I was like, this is so true. And my life's going to change. And, whatever it is, I don't know how many times I read it, but I always felt like being present was this like kind of amorphous and tangible thing. It's like, okay, great. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was finding the breath awareness is like, okay, I
Mm.
can build that muscle.
Did you know that your muscles are holding on to thoughts, memories, and feelings? If you have a tight neck or back, you're not just getting old, you're experiencing a buildup of tension from the life you've lived. Most people don't know this, but there is a part of your brain that can reverse and prevent chronic tension. When you relax your muscles, you not only move better and regulate your nervous system, but you also free yourself from the grip the past has over your body. So you can live with freedom, confidence, and enjoy your life now. How does that sound? Join me, Aimee Takaya, and discover what my clients are raving about at youcanfreeyoursoma.com.
Yeah, I love this. I love your description. I think it's clear that these two things work together to create a shift and a change in our awareness. The things that we're holding when you go into that quote unquote breath work session where you're doing that more rhythmic, active, intense thing, right? Like you said, it's kind of bringing up the things that your body has been carrying. Maybe some of them belong to you, maybe some of them don't sometimes, right? Like we carry stuff that we've picked up on from other people or from our family and all that, right? And that stuff's getting moved out. And then now you're saying, well, it doesn't end when you leave that breathwork class because your breath is there right there all the time. You can do this in a micro way. So I'm kind of thinking like this is the macro experience, and then the micro experience is the breath awareness. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's orient our listeners a little bit to you as a person, because as we were talking about before we started recording, we tend to kind of put labels on things like here you are, you're like, breath advocate and entrepreneur and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like podcast host, but we're actually people who are
Yeah.
multifaceted and have lived, the lives that we've lived. And, there's something really valuable about giving ourselves titles, but then there's also something really valuable about just like exposing the human underneath and not just being a title, right? So share a little bit about your personal journey. How did you come to be a 22-year-old reading Eckhart Tolle?
Well, I can probably thank my dad for that. He introduced me when I was, I think, 17, about to turn 18. He introduced me to James Allen, his book, As a Man Thinketh. Are you familiar with that book?
It sounds familiar. I don't think I've read it though.
So beautiful. It was written in like, I don't know, 1894. If you can allow me, I'll just recite the opening of the book.
Let's do, yeah.
Mind is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mind. And evermore he takes the tool of thought and fashions what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my father to thank me for kind of turning me on to like mysticism and kind of like new age thought. So that was really cool. I was also raised Christian, memorized a lot of the Bible, always loved the New Testament, the teachings of Christ, but felt like it was very misinterpreted. There's a lot of added stuff over the centuries. For me, it was really like when I was graduating high school, I think you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned in the intro, I'm a high school dropout.
Yes.
I've been an entrepreneur since before I knew what an entrepreneur was. I was 12 years old. And I've always kind of, been building something, products, businesses, brick and mortars, you name it. And, at the time that I was going into kind of my college years, everybody was like, in my case, my guidance counselor and whatnot, everyone was saying, go get an MBA. And it was huge. I mean, like everyone was going to get an MBA at the time. And then 4 years later, like the headlines are like, Forbes magazine and Entrepreneur and all that are like, you know, all these graduates, they're like delivering Domino's pizza and all this. There's just oversaturation. There wasn't a need for
Mm-hmm.
it. I read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography when I was like maybe 19. And I thought, I want to be like Benjamin Franklin. He's a Renaissance man. And, I've really been that my whole life, and it has not been easy. But what I can see now with, all of the leverage, the exponential technologies, artificial intelligence, I like to call it augmented intelligence or collective intelligence. It's like we're coming into a space where, this idea of being our professional identity is really falling away.
Mm.
And, I just wrote a blog post last month called You're Not Your Job Title, and Soon You Won't Have One. But it's beautiful because now we're being empowered. It's like you can have that, let's say it's like a product line, you can have that coaching business, you can have this other thing, and you can actually manage all of them and make them all successful. So I think we're kind of in the time of the synthesizer. We're coming into a time where your and I's, our unique consciousness can really express itself without so much, needing to be contained, in a box.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I feel like even, I don't really consider myself like a coach, although I fit into that nomenclature, with what I'm up to. And as an entrepreneur, like it's sort of like, again, you get like bundled somewhere. And at the same time, I am so grateful that I had the mentors originally that I had who basically told me, like, hey, you don't actually have to like pick a niche. Hey, you don't actually have to do that. I know
Mm-hmm.
everybody's saying you have to do that, but you don't.
Yeah.
In the same way that everybody's
Yeah.
saying you have to get an MBA and everybody's saying, if you don't graduate high
Mhm.
school, you won't make anything of yourself. But the truth is that, if you're an outlier, you're an outlier. If you're someone
Yeah.
who's on the edge and on the fringe, and if you're someone who, is reading great literature at a young age, you're going to be able to do kind of what you want to do if you set your consciousness to it, right? And
Yeah.
if you allow life to bring it to you, so maybe you can say a little bit about that, like as a mindful artist. You have this book that you're working on right now, Rise of the Mindful Artist in the New Meaning Economy, right? And you have another project as well. How does this kind of fit into what we're talking about here in terms of being able to expand not only our consciousness, but our identities in the world?
Mm. Yeah, well, it really kind of ties back into what I had just said. But these tools are, this book is, the kind of working title is The New Creator, Rise of the Mindful Artist in the New Meaning Economy. It's I kind of see it as a zeitgeisty book. It might be like
Mm.
relevant for like 4 years. I'll
Okay.
probably have to do revisions because we're in such an incredible transition. And, you've probably heard this phrase like you are the niche, right? There's marketing psychology that's important. For example, like I'm actually doing some work with a couple of kind of branding counsel to like, what are you, what are you known for? Like, what
Mm.
is the thing that I can go, okay, that's who I'm going to go to for that one thing, right? On some level, it's important to be in a way gettable in the
Yes.
marketplace. But we're really coming into this time where our consciousness is essentially, our consciousness is essentially the coder now. Our imagination is kind of the prompt. And you can see it. It's like productivity is just being taken off our plates and it's going up the ladder into consciousness, into imagination, into soul. And yeah, so I think it's a really exciting opportunity. There's this connection to the presence practice that is, to me,
Mm.
it's directly connected to that whole conversation about the new creator. The new creator understands that who they are is the product, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, at this phase, we're going into a place where our imagination is being amplified at the speed of light at 100, 1,000x. So it's a really beautiful time, you know?
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
totally. And bringing it back to kind of our original prompt here with this idea of flow, lack of flow, I'm kind of what I'm seeing in this conversation is that the the flow is actually always there, but then we may come up against some kind of limitation or boundary, right? That temporarily blocks the flow or lessens the flow,
Mhm.
right? But that undercurrent, just like our breathing, is always there. So even
Mhm.
as we are, giving ourselves a title or a label or boxing ourselves into
Mhm.
a limited point of view for a moment, so that you, as
Mhm.
you say, we're gettable, right? The authenticity of who we are as a person is still there. It's still that flow underneath of it. And it's
Mhm.
actually what's kind of the foundation of all of it. And
Absolutely.
breaking through and, bursting through those barriers or those boxes, right, is an important part
Mhm.
of this process of allowing for momentum and allowing for growth.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of pieces in there that have been really powerful for me the last couple of years. The one is that natural intelligence, that essentially somatic intelligence, that kind of pre-linguistic intelligence. So there's like a two-part practice I like to use with that breath awareness practice. So like the first thing is coming to your breath, and that's usually it's kind of superficial. It's like, okay, I'm bringing my attention. It's usually like up in this area. The next step is to take that awareness deeper into the body. It's like usually like down in this abdomen area. And then you're going to feel something. Like if you're bringing your attention to that part of your body, you'll notice typically it's like occasionally it's neutral, but oftentimes, particularly if you're faced with a decision or if you're interacting with a person or doing an activity, there will be either a contraction or an expansion,
Mm-hmm.
a tension or an excitement. And so I think it's really important as part of this practice and as part of being and stepping into the new creator is moving with what feels good. Do what thou wilt, and do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. I met this spiritual coach up. He self-proclaimed spiritual coach up in the mountains at a hot springs last winter, and we were in this like beautiful, natural, very cold plunge area pool. And we struck up a conversation. He told me he was a spiritual coach. I asked him, what's the advice you find yourself giving people, your clients, most often? And he said, do what feels best in each and every moment, and
Mm-hmm.
things will work out. And I do think it can be that easy. And what feels best could be doing that spreadsheet work to manage your business so you don't feel like a procrastinator, or it could be having that difficult conversation that you've been putting on the back burner. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna la-ti-da, but as we do that, obviously we're taking care of, we're being with what is, and we're living with life as it unfolds. So I think that's really essential to that whole practice.
Yeah. I love that it's very simplistic. And there's parts of me that also feel that it's, even though it's so simple, it can feel rather advanced in the moment because of our
Mhm.
discernment and the way that we get our discernment clouded all the time by
Mhm.
the expectations of others, by the judgments that we hold about
Yep.
ourselves. There's all these different ways that we have that clutter,
Mhm.
that, as you say, with the more, intensive breath work, or with my modality, we do it through movement patterns and releasing stuck contracted musculature, right? That's getting rid of that muscle memory that prevents you from being in that awareness of what feels best or what feels
Mhm.
right. And so I think, like, this is a, I mean, I love this advice. I think it's beautiful. And there's some steps to get there before a
Mhm.
person
Mhm.
can actually be in touch with that in an authentic way.
Yeah.
How, in terms of your experience with this, like, can you share a little bit about, like, when you're going to make a decision, a big thing, how do you kind of tap in to see, if your discernment is spot
Mhm.
on, or if it's clouded by something, if it's clouded by
Yeah.
some kind of programming?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it seems like we're both kind of in a way doing the same thing with different modalities, but also very similar. Obviously, breath and movement are directly connected.
They are. Yeah.
Expansion and contraction, very much mimicking, mirroring, participating with the expansion and contraction of the universe. But what I do, well, for me, I lay down and breathe. It's just what I do. I do, some form of rhythmic breathing, usually at least 3 to 5 minutes. There's another tool that I like to use. I call it the meta question. And I typically before, like if I have to make a big decision and I know what the decision is, I'll lay down and breathe and then usually get the decision in that session. There's another practice I like to use. I call it the meta question. And this is kind of like if you don't know the question or if you're just kind of feeling like, ugh, it could be anything. I feel a little bit stuck. I feel a little bit confused, brain fog. I don't know what to do. The meta question is this. You ask the question, what question, if I asked, would give me an answer that would allow me to move forward in this area?
Mm.
And this area is specific. You kind of fill in the blank. But the rest of that is just one open-ended meta question. And then just let it go. Give it up. Let the universe bring it back to you. Usually, in my experience, it's usually 24 hours or less. The question comes to mind, and I ask that question. And then when you get the answer to that question, you act and move forward. So yeah, I would say those are kind of like the two really kind of power tools that I like to use. But also something I wanted to mention, earlier you were talking about sitting in meditation. I think one of the reasons why, for me, meditation was really hard. I did a
Yeah.
10-day Vipassana retreat. I
Mhm.
was like basically suicidal by the end of it. It was just like
Yeah. It's
terrible.
hardcore. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I realized, and it wasn't until many years later, is that like, we're expected to sit down and, be with our nervous system and our thoughts, typically, as modern humans, in a dysregulated nervous system.
Right.
So as soon as I used rhythmic breathing to turn down the parasympathetic nervous system, regulate my nervous system. Then it's like meditation's great. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I did
Yeah.
two 10-day Vipassana sits when, before I started doing somatics, right? The somatic movement. And,
Mhm.
I was a yogi at the time. I was doing tons of yoga, and my body was really tight and tense. And I didn't even know that my body was really tight and tense. And so for me, it was physically painful to sit in those cross-legged positions for
Yes.
5 hours. And the entire
Yeah.
meditation was just on how much this sucked and how much pain I was in and what a
Yeah.
fool I was and what a whiner I was. Like the whole meditation was just like I think you used a term earlier, like agony versus ecstasy. It was
Yeah.
agonizing, and
Yeah.
then now, and I like to show people this, and maybe this is something you do too. If we do, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes of somatic movement, release all those muscles that are really tight in someone's body, or downregulate their nervous system, those things happen together. And then they
Yeah.
sit up. And I
Yeah.
mean, I watch a room full of people just sitting cross-legged so comfortably with their spine
Yeah.
erect so effortlessly, just
Yeah.
ready to meditate, So I think, again, like some of these things that seem so simple are actually rather advanced when we have a dysregulated nervous system. There's a few steps before you get there, right?
Yeah, Aimee, can I ask you, do you have any, I've kind of fallen out of touch with kind of movement and dance and kind of
Yeah.
tapping in that way. Is there a practice or something that I could do just at home or the listeners we could do really easily that's accessible that
Oh,
would
from
help?
what I do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, what I do is one of these things that is also very simple, but seems like it's under that category of too good to be true. But once you do it enough times, you go, oh, wow, this actually makes sense. Kind of like
Sure.
breathing, like, oh, just pay
Yeah.
attention to your breath and like your life will start to transform. And it's like, oh, that sounds really simple, but it actually works, right?
Yeah.
So, I teach a form of movement. The modality is technically called HANA somatic education. And what we do is we have you consciously contract a muscle or groups of muscles. And then very, very
Mhm.
slowly, you let go of that contraction. And then you wait for and you feel where's the end of this movement? Where am I done with this contraction? And then
Mm.
you let your body relax as much as possible.
That's beautiful. So
And
is it like a full 100% tense?
you can do the tiniest little movement. It can be anywhere. In
Mhm.
fact, I invite people to explore their spectrum if they're comfortable. The idea here is that if you have a lot of tension in your muscles, we're not contracting your muscles to contract them. We are contracting them to release them. And so,
Mm.
therefore, you don't have to do a big contraction. It can be kind of lazy or casual compared to what you think of as exercise because we're
Mm.
simply activating the muscle to tell it to relax and lengthen and turn off from whatever
Mhm.
habituated contraction it's currently in. And then I usually pair these movements with breath.
Okay. So how long would I do that for? Like maybe I'm laying down,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
so
I've got
yeah.
I can totally send you some videos.
I'd
But I
love
mean, you
that.
know what I mean? Like just let's try it right now together. Anybody at home can
Yeah.
try it. And then
Yeah.
maybe you can guide us also in like a little bit of breath. I
Yes.
would love that.
Yes. Let's
So
do it.
get yourself a little more situated comfortably on your chair. You might even have your legs down if you can, just so that
Hmm.
you're kind of a little more
Hmm.
neutral pelvis.
Hmm.
Right? And then just notice your back. Just notice your lower back, notice your shoulders, and just notice any sensations there in your back or your shoulders. Maybe there's some residual tightness, or maybe it feels good. Just notice what's there. And then you're going to inhale and you're going to arch your back. And as you arch your back, you're going to feel your body kind of rise up and your back muscles engage. And then super, super slow, you're going to come out of that arch. So you contract and then super, super slow, come all the way out, and then find rest and just let your body totally relax at the end of the movement. Just take that pause to feel I'm not arching my back anymore. And then you can try it again. You can arch your back, contracting your back muscles, and then very slowly, maybe slower than last time, come out. And you're looking for that moment that you're completing the movement, right? That it's done. Yeah. And you can do that maybe like 3 to 5 times, right? And once you've completed that, just check in with your back again. So just feel and sense into your back. Is there anything you notice about your back after trying that?
Yeah, it feels more relaxed.
It is. Yeah, it's literally more
Mm-hmm.
relaxed. So
Mm-hmm.
the system that I'm trained in is quite extensive, and we can apply this to pretty much any muscle in your body, right?
Mm.
And when I'm doing body work, I you have my hand to press against. So I
Mm-hmm.
would like you
Uh-huh.
I would put my hands on your shoulders, say you were laying
Mm-hmm.
on your stomach and
Mm-hmm.
lifting your head to contract your back, like
Mm-hmm.
a cobra or something, right? And I would
Mm-hmm.
put my hands on your shoulders and I would meet you with the exact force that you give me. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would follow you as you release. I would follow you out with that force, which would deepen the release. So that's kind of like the
So
mini
could
lesson.
that makes a lot of sense. So could that work with something like push-ups? Like could you do a push-up and then
You could, yes. So what you're
yeah.
working with there would be like an eccentric contraction. And there's like people who are really into
Mm-hmm.
this, like in the workout world, because you basically work the muscle
Mm-hmm.
twice. If you release
Mm-hmm.
slowly, you're
Mm-hmm.
building the muscle in a different way, and you're also building more control. The way
Mm-hmm.
you could make it
Mm-hmm.
more somatic would be when you come all the way out of the push-up, you actually let everything go for a moment. You like
Mm-hmm.
come all the
Yeah.
way out and just let everything go limp and you don't hold yourself
Mm-hmm.
up anymore. That would be the
Mm-hmm.
way to do it more somatically. Yeah.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. My dad has been raving about these BFR bands for years. Are you
What
familiar
is
with
that? I
those?
don't know what those are.
It's blood flow restriction.
Mhm.
The ones that he's got are pretty high tech. I think they're like $500 or something. But basically, it uses like air pressure, and it like restricts the blood flow. And then if it basically allows for like high impact workouts without the impact.
Oh,
So
okay.
it'll really break your muscle down, but you're not having to, really go too hard. I
Oh,
wonder if
wow.
I wonder if that would be interesting in somehow combination with that. But that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and I think the one immediately when you say about those bands, it makes me think of like in yoga, the tourniquet effect, where we're
Hmm.
kind of cutting off, like, you're holding a pose. And what's the benefit of that? Well, you're
Hmm.
cutting off
Hmm.
blood flow
Hmm.
to a certain area and then
Hmm.
using those muscles. And then when you release out of that pose, blood rushes back to that area, right?
Hmm.
And flushes
Hmm.
the muscle.
Hmm.
And it's something
Yep.
similar, maybe, with breath holds, right?
Hmm.
Because in various
Yes.
types of breath, practice, we hold our breath. And I actually have
Hmm.
a little thing I do with that where teaching people how to be relaxed in their breath hold, because I certainly wasn't. I
Mm.
was like super
Hmm.
clenched in my breath
Hmm.
holds, you know.
Hmm.
But in terms of breath holding, like I feel like that's kind of related to what we're talking about here. What's the benefit of kind of restricting oxygen for a period of time?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, there's so much in there. That space when you do like a series of rhythmic breaths and then you do an exhale hold, like that is one of the most peaceful places I have ever been. When your blood is just saturated with oxygen. So speaking of hold, should we do a short breathing
I would love
exercise?
that. Yes, please.
Awesome. Okay, so this is one I like to do. Basically, it's just super accessible. It's very quick and it'll give you a little taste of the breath here. Very simple. So we're going to take 10 breaths. We'll inhale through our nose. We'll exhale through the mouth. We'll let the exhale just happen naturally. And then on the 10th inhale, we're going to hold for about 15 seconds. And then when we let that go, just let it all go. Kind of like what you're doing. All right. So if you're driving, don't do this. because you could pass out. And yeah, sitting, laying down, whatever position's best for you right now. If you're sitting, spine's up straight. So let's just close our eyes and we'll begin by exhaling all of our air. And here we begin. Inhale through the nose, release. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Halfway there. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Inhale, release. Two more. Inhale, release. Last one. Inhale and hold. And release. How do you feel?
I feel yummy. I feel so blissy and yeah, it was really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that as like, it doesn't take a ton of time, right? I think
Hmm.
it's so important to have, again, these micro practices for people that are accessible. And that one certainly was.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, I've done the kind of, the rhythmic, more intense breath work, and you get that again, saturation of oxygen. And when you're full up, it's like you feel like you can hold your breath and just glide. You're just like, I'm good. I'm good. I got
Hmm.
everything I need. And I'm thinking about it in relationship to that, original topic that we prompted everyone with, which is that, we get into these flow states and it's like we feel like, oh, we could just be here forever. We could just be here forever. And then something's going to happen. Life is going to happen. We're going to get
Hmm.
tired. We're going to get somehow maybe dysregulated for a minute, and then there's going to be that restriction again. But, part of me thinks like, that's just kind of the adventure, isn't it? Like, that's sort of like, that's
Hmm.
the contrast. That's what makes the bliss so blissful, is that it's not
Hmm.
always there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It takes a long time. It took me a long time to really let that sink in. And now, kind of to what you said, I'll find those moments of tension or stress or where I'm, imagining something that doesn't feel good in my body, and I'll come back. And what for me, one of the big, and it seems to be inside of your work very much as well, but the cycle, I'll often say, like, between birth and death, there's breath. Master breath, master life. And a lot of the masters over the millennia have talked about dying before you die in one way or another.
Yeah.
So that I kind of see like that clenching and then the release, or the inhale and then the expiration, as a little micro moment to practice that letting go, non
Yeah.
attachment, dying before you die. And in that process, we're in a sense kind of born again into a new moment. We
Yeah.
do, especially in the West, like we're just control freaks, most of us, right? And there's a certain, there's a certain necessity for that, so we don't get, hit by a car or, you know, all the things.
Right. But clenching and trying
Yeah.
to control it, it can suffocate our natural awareness if we're too
Hmm.
far in that direction. I think
Hmm.
like, and maybe this is a great time to talk about some of that somatic intelligence, or the natural intelligence that's underneath and
Hmm.
actually the foundation of our beingness, right? Which we can tap
Hmm.
into, like land there. Like, I think, those
Hmm.
of you who did this breath, practice, right? Like, you tapped into that for a moment, you tapped into that
Hmm.
awareness. And,
Hmm.
when people are, I guess, caught up in the agony or caught up in the restriction, right? We've already kind of discussed this, but maybe you can go a little bit deeper into, why does it feel like we're not going to be able to find that peace again?
Hmm.
Like, going
Oh
back to, like,
man.
let's go back
Yeah.
to like time travel to
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
back in one of those
Yeah. Yeah.
times where
Yeah.
you just had 3
Yeah.
weeks of like it all going well. And then now
Yeah.
we're back in it. How do we forget? How do we forget that
Yeah.
our natural intelligence is there?
Aimee, I have a hypothesis about that, and it's kind of far out.
Okay.
It ties actually into that friction and also the kind of dynamic, polarized nature of the universe. Like, the whole universe is kind of fundamentally kind of oneness and two-ness, or something and nothing, or male and female, or black and white, or, it just goes on and on.
Duality. Yeah.
My hypothesis, indeed, you can't have oneness without duality, without separation. So my hypothesis is that it's playful, but we have to forget to remember.
Yeah.
It's just life.
Yeah, yeah. And I think again, it speaks to that, the way that my somatic intelligence has like come to a similar conclusion is like we're here for the adventure. We're not
Mm.
here to just coast without any friction
Yeah. Yeah.
endlessly. We're here for the peaks, and the peaks come with the
Hmm.
valleys, and they come with the
Hmm.
intense incline, and then yeah, we can slide down and it's blissful and there's this coasting, but it wouldn't be that exciting or that fulfilling to just always be chill or just always be good, you know?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I hate to believe it, but I think it's true.
Yeah.
My dad's been
Yeah.
saying that for years. Hey, man, like, what's it all for? It's the adventure. If like, how many, we've all heard the stories of either billionaires or jackpot winners or whatever, and some of them commit suicide or end up crazy or drug addicted. So yeah, we need that. We need that evolutionary drive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, I'm very much, I can relate to, I'm not quite a high school dropout. I did get my high school diploma, but I am a college dropout.
Nice.
And
High five.
high five. Yeah. And I was almost a high school dropout. I was pretty close. I was so lucky that I was like such a smart cookie. And like in what was
Yeah.
it, like seventh grade, I was at a school where they let me do high school work. So I basically just got like a year of high school credit when I was in
Nice.
seventh grade. And so that kind of saved my ass later on. But like, you know, there's something in a person who is kind of, I don't know whether you want to call it like our type, if we're going to box ourselves in for a microsecond here, right? Like who enjoys the adventure of entrepreneurship, who wants to explore like not just all parts of
Mm.
the world at large, but like the inner
Mhm.
world and the inner environment, right?
Mm.
And so someone like this is someone like this. We're not going to choose the 9 to 5. We're not going to choose the
Mhm.
fast track career into the stability. There are other people
Mhm.
that choose that, and no shade to them. That is what their system wants. And I have become more and more comfortable with the fact that that's not what my system wants. My system wants an adventure. My system
Mm.
is down for that.
Absolutely. And the challenge of making it up. There's one of my heroes, entrepreneurial heroes, is named Peter Diamandis. Are you familiar with Peter?
It's,
He,
all these things you're saying, they sound really
yeah,
familiar. And then when you say them, I'm like, oh, yeah, but they're not in my
yeah.
regular world right now. So,
So Peter, he's written a bunch of books now. He is just an absolute hero of mine, from an entrepreneurship perspective. Just an incredible human being doing great work in the world. But I heard him recently, and I've been intuiting this for a while. But he said, and there's the problem. Okay, he said that he felt that entrepreneurs are going to be the last job title, basically the last role to play. And obviously, it looks like that is the case, when bots and AI can do all the things for us. And then we've got quantum computing coming. Obviously, there's the problem of economic agency. Like, there's going to be this interim period of like, who's going to buy your products or services as an entrepreneur if nobody has any money? So it's complicated. But yeah, it's a really cool time to be, just to be unique and to be the whole spectrum of our consciousness, particularly if you're like, if you believe in yourself enough to really take action, now is the time.
yeah. Well, and believing in yourself sometimes feels like, I'm speaking for myself here, like a full-time job when you're an entrepreneur, because like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can have a coach or a friend or someone who's going to be your cheerleader, but at the end of the day, like it's you who has to step through that threshold
Yeah.
and do the next
Yeah.
thing and do the next step or whatever
Yeah.
it is, and keep the
Hmm.
thing going.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like, and speaking to again that ebb and flow, I've learned, especially over the last 2 years, that those times when I'm feeling down, those times when the flow goes away and I feel like shit, it's actually a time of rest. It's actually a time of
Mm,
recovery and rest sometimes, because
mhm,
it's almost like I thought of as like, maybe this is, this mind that I'm like blaming for everything, that's like, telling me these lies that say like I'm not going to succeed or whatever.
mhm.
Maybe that is my somatic intelligence having figured out that if we make her think her life is falling apart, she'll just lay in bed all day and we'll
That makes
finally get
sense.
the rest for her brain that we need.
Oh my gosh. That really resonates with me. Oh man. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You got to know when to take a break, As entrepreneurs, like we're always in our work. You got to create that separation, take a break, turn it off. Don't should yourself, bang yourself over the head for spending a day in bed, whatever it is. Take it in.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
yes, it's been such a fun conversation. I love how just kind of accessible and, honestly likable you are as a person.
Oh, thank you.
I can feel that you've spent a lot of time like being with yourself, because you're someone who just is naturally, comfortable being with others. And I feel like I'm similar too. Like you have to really spend that time like being with the uncomfortable parts of you to just be kind of
Mm.
ready for whatever another person is going to be for you at that moment, right?
Oh, for
So
sure. Yeah.
yeah, so I can sense
Oh,
that in you. It's been really a
thank you,
lovely time
Amy.
talking with you.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
really sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, I've enjoyed this as well a lot.
Yeah. Well, if people are curious about learning about, your book, The New Creator, if they want to learn more about what you're up to, where are some of the best places for the people to find you? And, I think in
Mhm.
the show notes you have some freebies, or you have some little offerings for people to sample. Maybe you can say a little
Yeah.
bit about all of that.
Yeah. So if you're at all kind of piqued by that conversation of the new creator, I send out a newsletter on Saturdays, and essentially it's like the kind of before the book comes out, it's like the gold nuggets and practices and experiments from the book. So you can sign up for that. Of course, it's free at leomars.com. That's Leo, Marrs.com. And then if you're at all interested in the kind of the breathwork stuff that I talked about, I have an app called Ether, ETHR. It's accessible on all devices, including computers. And that's at ether.one. And there's a 7-day free trial. So you can get in and check it out. If it's for you, great. If not, no biggie.
Cool. Wonderful. Well, everybody who's listening, check that out. It's again, been so fun to share this conversation with you about the ebb and the flow of our consciousness, of our reality, of our identities as, entrepreneurs or as creators in the world. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out through Instagram and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could also reach out to me on Instagram too.
There
So
you go. Yes. Yes. Find Leo on Instagram and let him know what you thought of this podcast. All right.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Hey there, friend. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts. Follow me on Instagram at Aimee Takaya and send me a DM about this episode. I'd like to thank you for being part of this somatic revolution. And if you'd like to support the podcast and help more people learn about somatics, consider leaving a review or a rating. And finally, if you'd like to have the experience of relief in your tight hips or back and learn to understand what your body is really saying to you, visit youcanfreeyoursoma.com. I can't wait to share with you what is truly possible. Bye for now.